Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Before starting the video, I request you to kindly support my channel. Subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Jazakallah. The remarkable life of Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi. He was a beacon of hope for his people and a nightmare for his foes. A noble leader of the Islamic world, a ruler whose victories were aided by divine support, a commander who achieved one of history's most significant triumphs, a brilliant strategist who unified the Muslim world with wisdom and vision. He vanquished his enemies on the battlefield and won the hearts of his people with his justice. The liberator of Jerusalem, Salahuddin Ayyubi, an unparalleled military legend. Experience his incredible journey, filled with untold stories. Let's spread his message far and wide. Support by subscribing, commenting, and liking the channel. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. The story of a pulpit destined for Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. In the heart of Baghdad, an elderly carpenter worked diligently in his final years, crafting a masterpiece, a pulpit of extraordinary beauty. Made of walnut wood and adorned with intricate mother-of-pearl inlay, the pulpit captivated all who saw it. Its fame spread across the city, drawing visitors eager to acquire it for their mosques. Yet, the carpenter always refused to sell it. "This pulpit belongs in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa," he would say. People were astonished. "But Jerusalem is under Crusader control," they exclaimed. Undeterred, the carpenter would reply, "This is my contribution. I am a craftsman, and I build pulpits. One day, a warrior will arise to liberate Jerusalem and place this pulpit where it belongs." The tale of this remarkable pulpit spread far and wide, inspiring all who heard it. At the time, Jerusalem was occupied by the Crusaders, who had the unwavering support of the Pope and European rulers. Meanwhile, the once mighty Seljuk Empire had fractured into smaller, often warring states. In Egypt, the Fatimid Caliphate weakened the Muslim world from within. Amidst these challenges, reclaiming Jerusalem seemed impossible. Yet, while many dismissed the idea as an unattainable dream, one young boy took the carpenter's words to heart. Decades later, that very pulpit was finally placed in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. The world came to know the boy as Salahuddin Ayyubi. The birth of a leader. Though his birth name was Yusuf, history remembers him as Salahuddin. Born in 1138 in Tikrit, modern-day Iraq, Salahuddin Ayyubi was of Kurdish heritage through his father, Najmuddin Ayyub, and had Turkish lineage from his mother. His father served under Emir Imad al-Din Zengi, a powerful ruler of the Seljuk dynasty. Salahuddin was deeply influenced by Nuruddin Zengi, a just and pious leader known for his unwavering commitment to Islam. Under his guidance, Salahuddin received a well-rounded education. Although initially more inclined toward religious studies than military training, he excelled in multiple disciplines, including philosophy, sociology, logic, jurisprudence, and history. He completed his studies at the prestigious Hadith University in Damascus. His diverse education made him a unique figure among military leaders, shaping his strategic brilliance and leadership style. Both Eastern and Western historians would later speak of Salahuddin with admiration, describing him as devout, just, courageous, and an exceptional commander. A defining moment. During a Friday sermon, a passionate young man interrupted Salahuddin, exclaiming, "Oh, Salahuddin Ayyubi, why do we speak of other matters while Jerusalem remains occupied?" Fired by the spirit of jihad, the man boldly challenged Salahuddin's priorities. Salahuddin remained silent, continuing the sermon and leading the prayer. The next morning, before the dawn prayer, Fajr, Salahuddin asked his soldiers, "Where is the young man who spoke of jihad yesterday?" The soldiers searched for him and reported back, "He is at home. He did not come for Fajr." Salahuddin responded, "This is why we are not yet marching to reclaim Jerusalem." Understanding that true victory required spiritual strength, Salahuddin spent 7 years preparing before launching his campaign for Jerusalem. On another occasion, someone noticed Salahuddin's solemn demeanor and asked, "Why do you never smile?" Muslims are encouraged to smile. Salahuddin replied, "How can I smile while Jerusalem remains under Crusader rule?" True to his word, he did not smile until the day he liberated Jerusalem. The road to conquest. At the age of 26, Salahuddin began taking on various roles within the state under the guidance of his uncle. As he grew older, divine destiny seemed to pave the way for his conquest of Jerusalem. Meanwhile, Nur ad-Din Zengi, Sultan of the Zengi state, managed to unite the Turkish states under one banner, establishing a partial Islamic unity. He successfully reclaimed dozens of cities from the Crusaders. While the Fatimid state in Egypt was in crisis, the Crusaders in Jerusalem were attempting to expand their influence across the Middle East. How did Jerusalem slip from Muslim hands? The loss of Jerusalem was a devastating defeat for the Muslim armies and states that had been marching from victory to victory and expanding rapidly. To understand how this happened, we need to look back in time. The year was 1099, and at that time, the Middle East was in turmoil. Many of the region's problems centered around Jerusalem, as it was widely believed that whoever controlled Jerusalem held the power to rule the entire world. In 1099, the Crusaders, who had established states along the eastern Mediterranean, united their forces and set their sights on Jerusalem. The Fatimids, unaware that Jerusalem was the Crusaders' ultimate goal, failed to take adequate precautions to protect the city. After an 8-day siege, the Fatimids surrendered Jerusalem to the Crusaders. On Friday, July 15, 1099, the Crusaders captured Jerusalem. They stormed the courtyard of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa and carried out a horrific massacre of Muslims. Crusader commander Raymond described the event in a letter to the Pope using these unforgettable words: "If you ask what was done to our enemies in Jerusalem, know this: our horses waded in Muslim blood up to their knees." Historian and writer Will Durant provides chilling details about the event in his book. Muslim women were killed by being pierced with spears and swords. Babies were forcibly taken from their mothers' arms, thrown from the walls, or had their heads smashed against posts. Among those most determined to reclaim Jerusalem was Sultan Nur ad-Din Zengi. Salahuddin's rise to power. In 1168, Sultan Nur ad-Din Zengi set his sights on Egypt, besieging Cairo. Controlling Egypt would provide a strategic advantage against the Crusaders. He dispatched his commander Shirkuh and Salahuddin to lead the campaign. Shirkuh successfully cleared Egypt of Crusaders and was appointed vizier of Egypt due to his achievements. Shirkuh was not only Salahuddin Ayyubi's uncle, but also his most influential mentor, a brilliant military strategist. Shirkuh taught Salahuddin many techniques, allowing him to rapidly hone his battlefield skills. However, shortly after assuming his new role, Shirkuh passed away. At just 31 years old, Salahuddin Ayyubi succeeded his uncle as vizier of Egypt and became the commander of Sultan Nur ad-Din Zengi's army in the region. Once he established control over Egypt, Salahuddin faced resistance from Fatimid factions, as well as their Crusader and Byzantine allies. He worked tirelessly to consolidate power in Egypt, restructuring the army and preparing for the challenges ahead. He also worked for the Sunni community, establishing Sunni madrasas and founding new institutions. Gradually, he purged the Batini Fatimid bureaucracy. Finally, in 1171, upon the command of Nur ad-Din Zengi, he ended Fatimid rule. Everything seemed to be progressing smoothly until tragic news arrived. Sultan Nur ad-Din Zengi had passed away. The struggle for unity. The conquest of Jerusalem was not destined for Nur ad-Din Zengi. When he suddenly passed away in 1174, the country plunged into internal turmoil. Salahuddin Ayyubi had to simultaneously prevent the state from disintegrating, maintain the Islamic unity established by the late Sultan, continue the struggle against the Crusaders. Salahuddin, who quelled internal conflicts and restored stability, took up the banner of leadership passed down from his mentor, Nur ad-Din Zengi. Like every Islamic commander of his time, he was now tasked with a historic mission, one that would change the course of history forever. Salahuddin Ayyubi's three great dreams. Salahuddin Ayyubi had three great dreams: to unite the Islamic world, to liberate Jerusalem from occupation, and to conquer Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. Islamic unity was achieved through the battles and struggles against the Crusaders of that era. The next target was reclaiming Jerusalem. Salahuddin's passion and determination for Jerusalem were well described by Qadi Baha al-Din ibn Shaddad. He was so overwhelmed with sorrow for Jerusalem that even mountains could not bear the weight of his grief. He was like a mother mourning the loss of her child. He would ride his horse tirelessly from place to place, urging Muslims to join the jihad to liberate Jerusalem. He would immerse himself in gatherings of people, crying out, "For Islam! For Islam!" His eyes were always filled with tears of sorrow. This state of anguish and determination stemmed from the occupation of Jerusalem. He often said, "As long as the city of Jerusalem and Al-Masjid al-Aqsa are under Crusader occupation, how can I laugh? How can I rejoice? How can I eat in comfort? How can sleep ever come to my eyes?" Salahuddin Ayyubi was resolute in his mission to reclaim Jerusalem. Preparation for the conquest of Jerusalem. Before setting out to conquer Jerusalem, order and discipline were essential. Salahuddin Ayyubi united the scattered and disorganized forces, bringing them under strict discipline to shift the balance of military power in his favor. With this unified strength, he turned his full attention to the Latin Crusader kingdoms. For Salahuddin Ayyubi, the time had come to become a nightmare for the Crusaders. He continuously devised strategies to drive the Crusaders out of the eastern Mediterranean. According to the chroniclers of the time, whenever discussions arose in any gathering, Salahuddin would somehow link the conversation back to Jerusalem. The cross placed atop the dome of the rock, and the cries of the Muslim women and children massacred on Friday, July 15, 1099, haunted his dreams, depriving him of sleep. The Battle of Montgessard, 1177. In 1177, the Crusaders committed atrocities against Muslims near Ramla. In response, Sultan Salahuddin set out from Egypt to confront the Crusaders. When he reached the vicinity of Ramla, he dispersed his army to nearby villages and towns to gather supplies and captives. While he gained some spoils and took prisoners, the 16-year-old leper king Baldwin, the fourth of Jerusalem, was pursuing Salahuddin with his army. Caught off guard, Salahuddin's 26,000-strong army, fatigued and disorganized, faced a sudden Crusader assault. The Crusader forces split Salahuddin's army in two with a swift maneuver and encircled his troops with their long lance cavalry. By nightfall, Salahuddin's forces had suffered over 20,000 casualties. One of Salahuddin's sons was also martyred in this battle. When the news of the defeat reached the people, fear spread, and rumors of Salahuddin's death echoed throughout Egypt. However, when Salahuddin finally returned to Egypt with his personal guards, he was greeted with immense joy and celebrations. The rise of the Ayyubid dynasty. Salahuddin Ayyubi then began organizing campaigns, establishing himself as the representative of Islam. Through his conquests, the Ayyubid dynasty continued to grow stronger with each passing day. One of the greatest challenges for Muslims since the First Crusade had been their inability to act in unity. Salahuddin ultimately broke this cycle, successfully uniting a vast majority of the Islamic world under his leadership. The territories of the Ayyubid state stretched from Egypt to Aleppo, controlling a significant portion of the Red Sea. This state, whose population was primarily Kurdish and Arab, was governed from Damascus, which also served as the center for Salahuddin's military operations. Salahuddin Ayyubi took pride in the successes of his state, yet he could not reconcile himself to the fact that the Holy Lands were in Christian hands. Like many rulers before him, he dreamed of conquering Jerusalem. Though he had attempted it in the past, he had failed. 10 years earlier, he had suffered a devastating defeat against the young King Baldwin, the Fourth of Jerusalem, at the Battle of Montjazard. Years later, Salahuddin had rebuilt his armies and devised new strategies against the Crusaders. Thanks to Egypt's agricultural wealth, the Ayyubid state had rapidly become an economically powerful entity. The Battle of Marj Uyun, 1179. In the same year, the Battle of Marj Uyun took place between Salahuddin Ayyubi and the Crusaders. As the Crusaders advanced along the coastal plains, they spotted Salahuddin's encampment below them. Believing a sudden attack would give them an advantage, they launched a swift assault from the hilltops. However, Salahuddin's forces were prepared for surprise attacks. They quickly assumed battle positions and countered the enemy's advance. Salahuddin emerged victorious from the battle. Tirelessly pressing forward, he continued to reclaim villages and towns from the Crusaders, including the fortress of Asan, the resting place of Prophet Jacob, peace be upon him. The Crusaders, overwhelmed by the relentless Muslim offensives, could no longer endure. The peace agreement and the expansion of the Ayyubid Empire. In 1182, the King of Jerusalem and Salahuddin reached a peace agreement. According to the terms, both Muslims and Christians were guaranteed the safety of their lives and property during the peace period. During this time, Salahuddin expanded his campaigns, attacking Armenian territories and capturing numerous fortresses. However, another significant event took place. Nur ad-Din Zengi's son, Ismail Zengi, died in his 20s after being poisoned. The fall of Baldwin IV and the path to Jerusalem. After Salahuddin Ayyubi took control of Aleppo from the Zengids, a fragile peace agreement between the Muslims and Crusaders lasted for about 3 years. However, the peace was broken with the death of King Baldwin IV of Jerusalem. Baldwin IV had suffered from leprosy since the age of 9. As the sole heir to the throne, his education was given special attention, as his ascension was seen as inevitable. At 13, Baldwin ascended the throne, but as he grew older, the disease progressed rapidly. His skin deteriorated, and he lost sensation in his hands. To hide his disfigurement, he wore masks, gloves, and heavy clothing that covered his entire body. Despite his youth and illness, Baldwin's reign faced constant threats, none greater than Salahuddin Ayyubi, who was ever watchful, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Siege of Kerak and Baldwin IV's last stand. A few years after Baldwin IV's condition worsened, Salahuddin decided to launch an attack on the Crusaders. His target was the fortified castle of Kerak. After days of planning, Salahuddin launched his assault. However, news of the attack reached Baldwin IV too early. At this point, Baldwin was 24 years old, nearly blind, unable to use his hands, and incapable of mounting a horse. Yet, despite his failing health, he was determined to lead his army to defend Kerak. To do so, his soldiers carried him on his bed to the battlefield. Upon learning that reinforcements had arrived from Jerusalem, Salahuddin lifted the siege and withdrew. This campaign, however, marked the final chapter in Baldwin IV's life. Soon after returning to Jerusalem, his health worsened, and he died from leprosy at the age of 24. His 9-year-old nephew, Baldwin V, was crowned King of Jerusalem, a development that pleased Salahuddin Ayyubi, as it paved the way for his greater plan, the conquest of Jerusalem. The breaking of the peace agreement. The new Crusader king declared the peace agreement with the Muslims void. Under his rule, the Crusaders, burned Muslim caravans and villages, attacked a caravan of returning Muslim pilgrims, massacring them, looted Muslim property. One of the worst offenders was Renaud de Chatillon, Prince of Carac. He personally looted Muslim caravans, mocking them by saying, "Where is your Muhammad now? Call him to help you." As he executed Muslim prisoners, he laughed hysterically. These actions were the final straw for Salahuddin Ayyubi. He swore an oath, "I will kill that prince with my own hands." Salahuddin immediately sent word to all Islamic states, declaring his preparation for the conquest of Jerusalem. From Egypt, Syria, the Abbasid Caliphate, and the Turkish states, thousands of volunteers joined Salahuddin's army, eager to be part of the force that would reclaim Jerusalem. Upon hearing this, the Crusaders debated their strategy. Their initial plan was to fortify Jerusalem and prepare for its defense. However, the new king wanted to prove himself and decided to confront Salahuddin in open battle, instead of waiting behind city walls. This arrogant decision would seal the fate of the Crusaders. The road to the Battle of Hattin, 1187. Salahuddin, known for his extraordinary strategies, devised a meticulous plan. Among his most trusted men were his son, Malik al-Afdal, whom he had entrusted with the governance of Damascus; his most reliable commander, General Gokburi, a key strategist in the Ayyubid army. Salahuddin first assigned Gokburi to scout the Crusader positions near Tiberias and identify water wells in the area. Once this was done, Salahuddin launched an attack on the fortress of Tiberias and captured it within a day. This forced the Crusaders into action, drawing them out of their fortified positions and into open battle, on Salahuddin's terms. The Battle of Hattin, July 4th, 1187. Salahuddin chose the battlefield carefully. He waited for the Crusader army near the village of Hattin in the scorching heat of July. The Crusaders, led by King Guy of Lusignan and Renaud de Chatillon, were drawn into a deadly trap. Salahuddin's mounted archers launched relentless hit-and-run attacks, harassing the advancing Frankish forces. A Muslim historian described the battle. Arrows rained upon them, turning their lions into porcupines. The Crusaders, trapped in the dry, waterless plains, were exhausted, dehydrated, and demoralized. Meanwhile, Salahuddin's forces were well supplied and strategically positioned. This battle would determine the fate of Jerusalem. The following day, a decisive clash occurred. Salahuddin managed to deploy an army of 50,000 to 60,000 soldiers near Hattin. The Crusaders were led by Guy of Lusignan, the king of Jerusalem. Anticipating the Crusaders' movements, Salahuddin had filled the wells, captured months earlier, with sand and rubble, leaving the Crusaders without a water source. When they reached the wells, they found them unusable and had no choice but to press forward, knowing retreat was impossible. The Crusaders were vastly outnumbered and severely suffering from thirst. Meanwhile, the Muslim army, well supplied with provisions carried on camel-drawn wagons, intensified the Crusaders' misery by setting fire to dry grass and bushes. The extreme heat, combined with their heavy armor and dehydration, left the Crusaders weakened and dying one by one. The disarray in the Frankish ranks became evident as their infantry lost cohesion and could no longer provide the protective formation crucial for their heavily armored cavalry. As night fell, the Crusader army decided to rest. In the stillness of the night, a sharp whistle broke the silence, the sound of an arrow. The final confrontation had begun, and dawn was breaking. Salahuddin positioned his forces with the Jordan River, fed by the Sea of Galilee, at his back. Between the Crusaders and the water source stood the Ayyubid army. According to one account, the Crusader forces numbered 63,000, heavily armed and determined to reach the water. Having spent the night without water, the Crusaders launched a desperate attack at dawn to break through Salahuddin's lines. However, The Muslim forces repelled their charge. By the second day, the Crusaders' thirst had worsened. They launched another assault in a frantic attempt to reach the water, but were repelled once more. As exhaustion and dehydration overwhelmed the Crusader army, Salahuddin ordered a full-scale attack. The Muslim forces swiftly encircled the weakened Crusaders, trapping them in a deadly ring. By the end of the battle, over 30,000 Crusader soldiers had been killed, and another 30,000 were taken prisoner. The Battle of Hattin marked a decisive victory for Salahuddin Ayyubi and paved the way for the eventual liberation of Jerusalem. In Islamic tradition, offering water to a prisoner symbolized forgiveness. In a gesture of magnanimity, Salahuddin personally handed an icy sherbet to Guy, quenching the thirst of his vanquished enemy. This act of mercy left a lasting impression on Western observers, and Salahuddin's portrait was later painted in admiration. As was customary in medieval warfare, some nobles, including King Guy, were later released in exchange for ransom. However, when Guy took a sip of the water and offered it to Reynaud, Salahuddin drew his sword. The time had come to fulfill his oath. It was now the moment to seek justice for the Muslim Ummah and to avenge the insults Reynaud had directed at the Prophet, peace be upon him. Salahuddin executed Reynaud on the spot, putting an end to his deeds. The remaining prisoners were brought before Salahuddin, chained and kneeling. The knights of the two militant orders, the Templars and the Hospitallers, were deemed fanatical and highly dangerous, and they were executed. The rest of the captives were sold into slavery. Afterward, Salahuddin Ayyubi visited the tomb of Prophet Shoaib, peace be upon him, near Hattin, and offered prayers. The Third Crusade followed on October 2nd, 1187. Salahuddin Ayyubi ended the 88-year Frankish occupation of Jerusalem. In response to this defeat, Christians launched efforts to reclaim the city. Pope Gregory III called for the Third Crusade to retake Jerusalem, and three of Europe's most powerful monarchs answered the call. Frederick I, Barbarossa, King of Germany and Holy Roman Emperor, King Philip II of France, and Richard, the Lionheart of England. Frederick Barbarossa entered Anatolia with an army of approximately 100,000 soldiers. However, his campaign suffered heavy losses due to unexpected resistance. After Barbarossa drowned in the Salifka River, his army dispersed, rendering the German crusaders ineffective. Meanwhile, the French and English crusader forces traveled by sea, but failed to defeat Salahuddin Ayyubi. Unable to achieve victory, they eventually retreated. Following Salahuddin's triumph, within 3 months, the cities of Acre, Nablus, Jaffa, Tebnine, Beirut, and Ascalon fell into Ayyubid hands. The Crusaders no longer had a viable army to defend Jerusalem. News of Salahuddin's victory at Hattin and his march toward Jerusalem spread across the Muslim world, inspiring volunteers from all regions to join his army. When Salahuddin's forces finally reached Jerusalem, the siege began. All eyes were fixed on the crosses mounted atop the city's walls, including the large cross placed on the dome of the rock. This sight only fueled the Muslims' resolve. Catapults began bombarding the city's walls, and when word reached Salahuddin that the northeastern walls were weaker, he redirected the siege engines to target that area. After relentless catapult fire, the northeastern wall collapsed. The Crusaders attempted a breakout maneuver through the breach, but Salahuddin's forces surrounded and trapped them. Faced with no other options, the Crusaders ultimately surrendered. The surrender of Jerusalem. Upon entering the city after its surrender, Salahuddin Ayyubi's army took control of Jerusalem with remarkable discipline. Unlike the Crusader conquest of 1099, no buildings were looted, no individuals were harmed, and no victorious soldiers mistreated the people. Salahuddin ensured the safety of all Christians by deploying patrols to guard the streets. The liberation of Jerusalem. As part of the conditions for surrender, the Ayyubids required a ransom for the city's inhabitants, 10 dinars per man, 5 dinars per woman, and 2 dinars per child. Those unable to pay would be taken as prisoners. Additionally, Muslim forces would take possession of the city's properties, including homes, goods, weapons, and agricultural lands. The Crusaders were given safe passage to the city of Tyre, and a grace period of 40 days was granted for ransom payments. After this deadline, those who could not pay, approximately 16,000 men, women, and children, became captives. On a Friday, just before prayer time, Salahuddin and his army entered Jerusalem. The first priority was to restore al-Masjid al-Aqsa to its former glory. The crosses, clergy, and even pigs that had been brought into the mosque were removed, and the sacred space was thoroughly cleaned. The Templars had converted sections of the mosque into storage and personal chambers, all of which were dismantled. The dome of the rock was purified with fresh water and then perfumed with rosewater and musk. The large cross that had been placed atop the dome was removed and replaced with a crescent. Salahuddin then ordered that the grand pulpit, originally commissioned by Nur ad-Din Zengi, be brought to the mosque. While Nur ad-Din had dreamed of placing it there himself, it was finally installed under Salahuddin's rule. Following the conquest, the mosque was prepared for prayer. The pulpit was set beside the mihrab. Carpets were laid, lamps were hung, and worshippers gathered. The sounds of prayer and invocations filled the air, replacing the silence left by the Crusader clergy. Joy replaced sorrow, hardship gave way to mercy, and the call to prayer once again echoed through Jerusalem. Justice was extended to all. Non-Catholic Christians, including Orthodox and Syriac communities, were allowed to remain in the city after paying an indemnity and agreeing to an annual tax. Upon hearing of Salahuddin's victory, Byzantine Emperor Isaac II Angelos sent a delegation to congratulate him. He also requested that Orthodox Christians be given control over their holy sites. Wanting to ensure harmony among Christian pilgrims, Salahuddin granted this request. Remarkably, these sites remained closed for only 3 days after the conquest before reopening under Orthodox administration. This victory demonstrated the fairness of Islam. Despite the suffering Muslims had endured under the Crusaders, massacres, desecration of holy sites, and forced conversions, Salahuddin refrained from seeking revenge. Instead, he upheld mercy and justice, treating the city's residents with dignity. The legacy of Salahuddin Ayyubi. Salahuddin Ayyubi's passing marked the end of an era. The schools and madrasas he established in Egypt became centers of knowledge, attracting scholars from across the Muslim world. These institutions played a key role in strengthening Islamic scholarship and purifying Egypt of Fatimid influences. Ibn Shaddad, one of his biographers, described Salahuddin as a leader of immense historical knowledge, a man who honored his word, and one who preferred forgiveness over vengeance. In 1293, as Salahuddin lay on his deathbed, he made a final request: "Bring me a long stick." Those present, puzzled, brought him one. With great effort, he pointed toward a cabinet in the corner. "Inside is my burial shroud. Take it out and tie it to the end of this stick." His companions did as he asked. Seeing the simple white cloth fluttering, the great leader gave his final command: "Now, walk through the streets of Damascus. At every corner proclaim, 'O people, you know Salahuddin Ayyubi. Behold, he leaves behind no wealth or treasures, only this shroud, the same as every man.'" On March 4th, 1193, Salahuddin Ayyubi passed away in Damascus. The people recited the Quran and wept for their noble leader, who left behind no riches, only a legacy of faith, justice, and selflessness. His life was a lesson in devotion, determination, and service to Islam. His heart beat for Allah, and his greatest ambition was justice on earth. His victory in Jerusalem was not merely a military conquest, but a testament to his unwavering faith. But why do we no longer see such blessings today? Perhaps because we must first transform ourselves. Many of us are consumed by worldly pursuits, thinking only of personal success and comfort. We must shift our focus to a higher purpose, seeking the pleasure of Allah and setting grand goals for Islam. Like Salahuddin, we will all one day be wrapped in a shroud, one without pockets, carrying nothing of our wealth with us. May Allah grant us the wisdom to live with this awareness and strive for a legacy that benefits the hereafter. Ameen. Even when you feel lost in this vast universe, you are not alone. Help spread the name of Salahuddin Ayyubi to the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. Allah bless you.